It is Thursday, November 15th, 2018, and this is the MMA Beat. Welcome, everyone. I am your host. My name is Luke Thomas from SiriusXM, as well as MMAFighting.com. A different version of the panel today. Some familiar faces, then some OG familiar faces. To my left, that is Danny Segura from MMAFighting.com, and the man I did, literally, this is true story, I did the first episode of MMA Beat with this guy. He makes his triumphant return. Mike Chiappetta is here. Hi, Mike.
I had a little more hair back then, but some people call me the Hoist Gracie of them.
The Hoist Gracie. That is who he is.
I'm starting to resemble him a little bit.
I was about to say, that is becoming a very accurate description in many more ways than one. At the very end of the table, you know that man. That's the man in the hat. That is Chuck Mindenhall, also known as Iceman.
SG synthetic gangster, like from the second wave.
From The Ringer, as well as MMAFighting.com. All right, boys, thank you for joining me. Don't forget, at the end of the program, we'll do a secondary program called After the Beat, where we take your tweets using the hashtag #TheMMABeats. Better questions today, because a lot of times what happens is I'll be like, hey, who's got a question? And everyone will be like, hey, what do you think about Conor's next fight? I'm like, we're going to cover that on the beat. I need stuff we're not going to cover so we can get to it after the beat. So we'll do that at the very end of the program. Appreciate all your questions, as usual. All right, let's get to it, boys. A lot of things that are always happening inside the world of mixed martial arts. You told me you were nervous and a little rusty before the show, Mike, so we're going to go to you first. Get this off with a bang, my esteemed guest here. TJ Dillashaw and Henry Cejudo appear to be, nothing is official yet, but appear to be headed on a collision course at UFC 233 in January. We all thought it was going to be at bantamweight. It appears to be at flyweight. Again, nothing's confirmed, but both participants are talking about it in that way, to the point where TJ Dillashaw says to ESPN on Monday, the UFC's paying me a buttload of money to go down there and just kill their division for them. A lot of different questions about this. Let's start with the most obvious one first. Why are they doing it at 125 as opposed to what we had previously thought was going to be a bantamweight fight?
To me, it looks like they just want to hopefully propel TJ Dillashaw forward. He's the guy that he's won the belt at 135. I think they like this idea of having the double champs in multiple divisions. It gives them increased visibility. It is, by the way, very on brand for TJ Dillashaw, the snake in the grass, to go down to 125, potentially steal the title, and kill a whole division in the process. This is a guy who, by the way, was sort of trying to head one of these mixed martial arts associations, fighters associations, and now he's ready to kill off jobs and is gloating about it. Very on brand, TJ.
Let me follow up with that. Why do you think that is? How can a guy go from being, again, whatever cockamamie scheme there was, he was part of it, and I'm not even mad at him for going to take this fight. I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all, but it is a weird contradiction.
I think at their core, these guys are mercenaries, right? They're fighters. This is a very individual pursuit when it comes down to it. Obviously, they have to train together and work together in the gym to improve. But when it comes to getting yours, it is what it is. Like, you have to move forward. I mean, I think it's not exactly something that I would praise him for in terms of the way he's gloating about it. But it also is a storyline that they can push, right? That the fate of the division could be hanging on this fight.
What's funny is Dillashaw's heel turn is more like, it's not really a heel turn, it's just like we started to get to know him better. You know what I mean? Over the course of time, you're like, well, that's just naturally kind of who he is. Because he's been kind of a natural, he ruffles people's feathers just by being who he is a lot of times. And I'm just surprised in the sense that this comes out days after we are basically eulogizing the flyweight division. I mean, everybody just assumes that they're phasing it out. All the moves, they're cutting guys, and all of a sudden this fight is going to be contested down there. Now, I know Cejudo obviously has the belt. Maybe they're looking at something like, well, he should defend it once, and then, or you know what, maybe they're looking at something like, I don't know, I'm throwing out theories, but maybe they're like, well, Dillashaw, if he goes down, he does effectively kill it off. However they're looking at it, it's a really interesting dynamic that I always look at like in a broader poetic picture. You look at the way that the division formed, which was, I thought, really came out of Dominic Cruz's dominance. Like, he was so good that they had to create a division for some of those guys to have refuge, to go fight, and for it to be relevant again, because Benavidez was never going to get a shot at him. It was doubtful that Demetrius Johnson was ever going to get a shot at him again. They went down, they formed a division, they did what they did for the last 6 years or whatever it is, and now it's Dillashaw, his guy who's trying to kill it. These things are always, I love like panning back and looking at the big picture of MMA and fighting in general, because it's always somewhat absurd but poetic in those ways. But why they're doing it, I think, honestly, too, I think that Dillashaw just probably had his heart set on going down and getting a second belt. I really believe that he wants that for his legacy.
Would you put it past Dana White though to say, since this news got out about us getting rid of the flyweight division, I'll put this down there to just kind of sow some seeds of doubt.
I would not even a little bit.
Also, I mean, TJ has beaten the #1 contender Cody Garbrandt twice, right? So and Dominic Cruz is already,
no. There are bantamweight contenders.
there certainly are. But I'm saying in terms of the #1, in terms of like the top contender, Dominic Cruz is already sort of locked into a fight with John Lineker. He's already beaten Rafael Assunção fairly recently.
Assunção's got a win over him.
But then there's Marlon Moraes and everybody else.
There's tons. Sure. To me, this fight doesn't really make much sense in the weight class of 125. I mean, it should be, if you're killing off a division, which there's a lot of evidence already, fighters are being notified that this division is going to be gone. There's already been cuts. If you're going to kill a division, why don't you just get the champion and use him having the belt sort of as, here, you're getting a title shot, and we can build this as a champion versus champion fight, just because, you know, you still have the belt, and then, you know, we'll see whatever happens then. But I feel like the UFC is banking that TJ Dillashaw is going to run through Henry Cejudo, which I think it's ridiculous because, one, TJ Dillashaw is dropping to another weight class. We don't know how he's going to look. And two, Henry Cejudo, he just beat the pound-for-pound GOAT. You know what I'm saying? So what if Henry Cejudo goes out there and beats TJ Dillashaw, right? Retains his belt. Then the division goes out. Then he goes back to 135 because I'm guessing he's not going to get cut. And the guy he just beat is the champion.
That's the most perplexing part of it to me, is that, like, Henry Cejudo won. You finally have a changing of the guard here. This is a guy, like, if you can't promote a guy who was an Olympic gold medalist, who is, you know, a guy that likes to go out and talk to media.
Bilingual,
charismatic. If you can't promote him successfully, that points to, like, a greater problem with what you're doing as an organization. Yeah. And it seems to me like you'd want to at least give it a try, right? Like, what if you were going to do it when Demetrius Johnson was in the midst of his reign, because you were feeling like you just couldn't get any traction? I mean, I would still not be a huge fan of that, but I would sort of understand it. But now that you have a changing of the guard, you have a chance to, like, make things fresh and start all over again and push somebody who has had experience doing, like, major media. He's done, like, you know, he's been on all kinds of major shows and magazines and things like that. Why not give it a try with Henry Cejudo?
Well, there's a few theories I have. First of all, I think the thing about the double MAAA, that attempted whatever the F that was with Bjorn Rebney at the helm, my sense is that TJ probably was kind of, you know, reasonably all in on it, and then saw how it collapsed and was like, well, I'm not making that mistake twice. So when they offer me something, I'm just going to take it.
Yeah. So he went the Darth Vader route.
He went the Darth Vader route, and so it's a good way to be remembered forever. I'll tell you that. Mm-hmm. Number two, interestingly, I think this is really all about TJ Dillashaw. I think they see a guy in him who can turn a corner. That last fight with Cody Garbrandt, it had people buzzing. It filled up it was at the Staples Center, I believe, right? And it did pretty well on pay-per-view.
People knew that rivalry.
They did. You had Chris Pratt, you know, on the edge of his seat watching those two guys go at it, and I think they're like, you know what? Give that guy another belt. We might be able to have something on our hands here. And as you mentioned, of course, he's also a mercenary as well. The thing you said that was kind of interesting, you don't think it's that competitive down at 125?
I think it's very competitive.
I think it's more competitive at 125 than 135, but in the end, I still don't think it's very competitive.
So wait, are you siding with Cejudo?
No, I'm siding with Dillashaw. I think Dillashaw is probably as good as we think he is. I actually think he's better.
At 125?
At any weight. I think he's better than we think he is.
I think it's still a big gamble. I mean, we're talking about Henry Cejudo, an Olympic wrestler who's just displayed amazing striking and has improved so much. And he beat Demetrius Johnson. I feel like that should hold a lot of weight.
It is a risk. It's a huge risk for UFC because if he does go down there.
How is it a risk? He loses. He can just say, hey, that's not even my natural weight class. I'm still champion of this weight class over here.
You know, we have learned in mixed martial arts over time that if all things are equal except the weight, a bigger guy should win, right? Especially when it comes to the championship level.
Yeah, but then we see
TJ Dillashaw is supposed to win this fight. I think pretty much everybody would agree with that. Like, he's favored to win this fight. He should win the fight. He's the bigger guy. He's more experienced. He's beaten better opponents over time.
But it's all how you paint it. You could say, look, guys, chins don't hold up to that weight. Who's the one making the sacrifice? TJ Dillashaw could say, I'm the one making the sacrifice.
You're devaluing the champ if he takes an L against Cejudo, because once the flyweight division comes to an end and Cejudo goes up to 135, all of a sudden, the champion's not the best fighter in the world if Cejudo manages to retain his belt.
I think your arguments make sense, but they're also subtle arguments. Like, when people kind of look at it from the 30,000-foot view, and the fact of the matter is, if the 135-pound champ loses to the 125-pound champ, people look at that and go, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah. And
regardless of whether he's going to cut more weight, and he's never done this before. We totally understand that, but most people are not going to look that deep into it.
I think there's a lot of escape clauses. Look, there's never a situation where if a champion loses, it's like awesome. There's always a bill that you have to pay. Sure. But number one, you have a built-in rematch at 135, and then he gets to. Now, if you lose that, okay, well now you're in real trouble. But you have a built-in rematch, and I really think he's gonna sell it like, I'm the one who had to go and make all these sacrifices to get to this point to make the spot. I'm doing you a solid, and I'm still going to beat you.
He's not though. He asked.
Of course
for this.
he's not. Of course he's not. But he can always paint it that way.
And I would not give him immediate rematches if he loses at 125. Why should he get a one?
Well, at
I'm sorry,
135.
yes, you're right.
At 135. Yeah, they won't do it again. This is a one and done at 125.
Gotcha.
I would have to imagine.
I just think that it's, like you mentioned, it's not a done deal. This is not official. I still feel like at any point they could be like, no, it makes sense to have a 135. You know?
Yeah, for sure. All right, so a couple of things happened this past week that we really should sink our teeth into here a little bit. Let's start with UFC Denver, if we can. Now, there's a lot of different moving parts. I want to compartmentalize this as best we can. So I'll start with this way. Let's start with Yair Rodriguez. Danny, I'll go with you. Boy, we had talked a lot about this on MMA Hour, on this show a million times, and just in private conversation. Like, how could they cut this guy? How did he end up back in their good graces? The Zabit fight was supposed to happen. That fell through. He came in on last minute notice. He lands. There's a debate about whether you want to call it a comeback or not, but whatever you want to call it, it was a gut check moment. And boy, did he answer the call for that one, landing an utterly spectacular KO. Man, you want to talk about a resurgence after how many months was he gone? It was since May of 2017.
Yeah.
And he comes back and does that. Is that about one of the best resurgent performances for someone who got the boot from the UFC that you have ever seen?
It is, because he's been through so much, not only inside of the cage, that loss to Frank Yeager was devastating, and I'll stick by this. He was a victim of poor matchmaking. He wasn't ready for that, and he got thrown in there a bit too soon. So he loses that, which is already a big deal. And then the whole thing outside the cage of him getting cut, him having his dream of this being a UFC champion, that gets taken away briefly. Now he's back in it, it's a roller coaster. And he's a young guy, he's experiencing this at a very young age. So it's a lot. And this is a guy that, grew up in Mexico, from a very humble family. So it's a lot to take in. And for him to pull off this comeback against a Korean zombie, and not only that, but fight of the year, most likely, KO of the year after all that he's been through, this is straight out of a movie. And, props to Yair Rodriguez. It was an amazing comeback.
It sort of dovetails with my previous argument about the UFC's promotional problems when they were ready to get rid of this kid. What are you thinking? Like, this guy...
Lesson learned, don't use hashtag fake news.
I mean...
Can we talk about why he got cut? Because you ruffled the feathers of a powerful person? How petty do you have to be to do something like that? Dude, the UFC, if there's anything you can take from that Yair Rodriguez situation, they will cut off their nose to spite their face for the reasons you could never imagine.
And it was Rodriguez that wanted to go back in the UFC. That's why he didn't go with offers with Combate Americas. There was other offers out there. If this was a different person, you would have lost that prospect. He would have gone to a different organization. But he wanted to be in the UFC so bad, he worked things out with the company.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that they kind of shepherd his career going forward a little bit. This was a great win. I hope he gets a little bit of time off. This was such a grueling fight for both these guys. By the way, props to Chan Sung Jung too.
Sure.
Like, he's kind of forgotten in this incredible moment. This guy, he was still trying to finish the fight at the end, which is the only reason he put himself in the danger to get hit with that elbow. The most creative strike I've probably ever seen in MMA. I mean, the Showtime kick in this are probably 1 and 2. I guess however you want to order them is your business. But when you talk about the most incredible, impactful, innovative, improvisational strike we've ever seen, this is it, because the fight's ending. He's got really nothing to lose. He knows the fight. Most likely he's probably thinking this is a close fight. I could lose here, and this angle that we've never really seen any kind of strikes thrown at.
Bent over at the waist.
How do you generate the torque and power to next? It is unbelievable.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you might have pointed this out, or somebody, I know MMA Fighting has covered this, but this was the most highly rated fight night they've had in quite some time.
Dave Meltzer talked about it. Yeah,
6 months. Yeah.
I mean, it's again, these poetic tie-ins, because here's a guy who was cut. He went through this whole process. You mentioned the bad matchmaking. That was way too much too soon. Then he's booked into a fight with Zabit, who I think would have been another. I mean, you never know, but that would have been a monstrous task for him to have to come back and fight.
It's definitely not a tune-up fight.
Right. Yeah. So I'm like, we might have still been talking about that. he ends up fighting the Korean Zombie in this fight. He takes that spot, and he's able to do that with the biggest audience that they've had in a long time.
Short notice, too.
He just did something for the UFC that and we're winding down on that, Fox deal. And I think that there's always that thing that happens, and this is one of them, it's so improbable that suddenly you look at it and you understand the sport's beauty again. And I feel like that kind of translated. You could see it within fan chatter, but you could see it within the media, where something so improbable happens that you're just like, this is crazy. Because a Hail Mary in football is a beautiful thing, but a Hail Mary like that, where you see a guy who's winning the fight, and all he has to do is basically back away, and he goes in for the kill, and he takes the brunt of this ridiculous, that nobody registered with the naked eye. You just see him plant and go to the canvas. I mean, that is like a thing of beauty. If you don't look at that and you can't see how great that whole thing is, and maybe this isn't the sport for you, but that whole process, I mean, I sat there for a good 5 minutes just like watching everybody's responses and being like, I cannot believe that just happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm like, then you're like, did it happen before the bell? And you realize it happens 1 second before the bell. Just the most brilliant thing that could have happened for his career, and probably one of the more, I would think, one of the greatest things that could have happened for a fight night. You know what I mean? Like, for something like that to finally happen, it just
Making
I don't even
Sports
know,
Center.
just
I don't
makes
even know
it.
if there's like really an equivalent for it in sports, because a Hail Mary is basically luck, right? You know, everyone runs to the end zone. Hopefully our tall receiver can jump higher than your tall cornerback and hope for the best. But I think that's a good point. Like, you know, being a grizzled veteran of the game as I am, I was on MMA Beat 1. I've seen a lot, man. It takes a lot to like really like get us out of our chair. As you said, like when that strike landed, I didn't even know what happened at first. Like, it took the replay to see. And the fact of the matter is, he meant to do that. Like, that was not an accident. People say it was a lucky strike. Absolutely not. I mean, he throws a lot of really unorthodox stuff that you don't really see other guys do. He meant to do that. Like, he bent over, he generated torque. And by the way, I think there's been, I've seen at least on I think on Reddit, where somebody found him doing a similar thing earlier in the fight.
Yeah, a couple times, yeah.
Right. So this is something he made a part of his thinking, and to execute it that late in a fight. The 25th anniversary show, that's just
exactly
when you're thinking like the progress, the evolution of the sport from there. It was like a perfect cap on the 25th anniversary evening. Like, look how far we've come.
It really was quite amazing. Actually, I didn't have hardly any time to get to it on Monday's show, but he actually incorporates elbows from a trunk rolling. Yeah. So a lot of guys keep their elbows tucked and they look through their gloves. He actually just lets the elbows fly in every direction as he rolls, which I had never even seen before.
I think I've seen Anderson Silva do it a little bit here.
A little bit like this, but that was still not quite the same kind of thing where Chancellor Jung was just driving into him constantly. So when he was rolling with the punches, he was just slashing elbows every possible direction. It's just remarkable. The other thing that sort of occurred to me about the win was that, fairly or not, people didn't like the fact that he was cut, and they liked the fact that he was brought back. But there was sort of this bad blood about Zabit, and I think people were like, well, he lost to Frankie so one-handedly. You know, how good is he? Is he worth the trouble?
Yeah, he was an all-time great.
I know. But I'm just saying what the prevailing, some of the discussion was. It was like, he's a little bit hard to deal with. Was he really that injured? Why isn't the Zabit fight going forward? Finally, they make it. It falls through. And then, he was coming off that Frankie Edgar loss. I think he, in one fell swoop, erased all of the negativity, which, it sucks that you have to do something like that to do that. But do you guys share my view that, like, you want to talk about buying goodwill? Wow, he hit the jackpot with this one. No?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that, in every situation, you're always one fight away from changing the whole, we've seen it a million times, but for a guy like that, I honestly think that when that Frankie Edgar thing happened, because it was so one-sided, that I think people looked at him like we were maybe being not sold a bill of goods, because we'd seen him use his legs, especially so creatively. His striking was so creative, and the way he was able to beat the guys leading up to that fight. It wasn't like we were sold a bill of goods, but I think that people thought we were rushing to judgment that he was this buzzworthy radar busting guy. Watch out for him; he'll be a future champion in a year. That type of thing. This performance just reminds you that he was losing. It's in some ways, without, the contender and all that is okay, but when you have the heart and the creativity to persevere and to do that, it always translates way bigger than just, plowing through a guy or whatever. I think that it's just the way he did it, that flair for dramatics that translates. For me, it erases all of that.
At high elevation, too, in the fifth round. High elevation. Yeah.
For me, the biggest takeaway was leading up, once he got re-signed, the whole thing of him not fighting Zabit feel like you know how MMA fans out there, oh, he's scared, he's not a real fighter. gets cut, gets re-signed, booked against a Beat again, pulls out due to injury. We heard all that again. He's not a real fighter, he's scared. Then he takes a short notice fight against Chan Sung Young, one of the scariest guys out there, puts on an amazing fight, ends the fight with that insane elbow. This guy just proved he's a fighter and more. Plus, his post-fight interview, just giving it while getting carried by his coaches, sending out a statement to his fans, thanking Korean Zombie while laying on a hospital bed. The guy's a real fighter, and there's no doubt about that. And he's
I love how there's always ways for people to find to be haters in this, because I heard a lot of people afterwards like, oh, that was the luckiest thing I've ever seen, like just talking about. But I think you pointed out, that's what I was trying to point out earlier. You'd circled where he's kind of peeking up.
Yes.
You could see his eyes.
The corner of his eye, yeah.
I mean, maybe there's elements of luck to land something like that, because it's not probably the easiest thing to land, but he certainly knew what he was doing.
Yeah, of course. It's like, I don't know how to explain it. Like if you try to dive off a diving board, maybe you don't quite hit it every time, but you know exactly what you're trying to do to make some kind of twisting, triple Lutz, whatever. I don't know what the dive is, but you get the idea. Another competitor there on the card, we'll get to Cerrone in just a minute, but I want to focus on Mike Perry very briefly if we can. I'm not sure where he goes from here. Mike Perry is telling Submission Radio, first his arm was broken. Now I think it's not broken,
right.
But whatever the
So
case,
Mike Perry,
which is good. I mean,
yes.
I certainly don't want his arm to be broken.
Of course.
But he told Submission Radio, the boys there, that he didn't really click with Jackson Wink, and he didn't want to be a part of the camp. Interestingly, Gary Rodriguez, not a part of the Jackson Wink camp because he didn't want that drama. That drama is causing a bit of problems that I don't think they're quite aware of. In any case, he wants to go back to Florida, maybe still work with Frank the Tank Lester. What do you make of what's next for him? Because he's still in his 20s, and I still think he's got a lot of upside, but we're waiting for him to turn this corner, and it's just not quite happening.
I think he needs to find stability somewhere, because, I mean, I don't know who all he had in his corner before, a couple fights back, but there was all the audio coming out where the corner advice was sort of ridiculous.
It was Alex Nicholson,
right?
I think it's
and it was like, you knew then, you're like, okay, he needs to get with a better camp, he needs to get with better people who know what they're doing. So the whole Winklejohn Jackson thing seemed to make sense, but if he doesn't click with him, he can't be the nomadic free spirit that he's been. I think that if he really wants to take this seriously, he's taking tough fights. He's doing it the hard way, but he has to put himself in a position where, because you know how it is. Those guys, the voices and everything that you feed in, the discipline, that's all going to play. And I feel like he's just not, either he's hard to get through to, or he's just not able to make that deeper connection to his corner so far. He has guys he loves. If you talk to him, like his Florida team, he's very dedicated to. At that point, you're sort of like, okay, maybe you should base yourself there and figure it out and let it blossom from that. But I don't really like the nomadic. He's a unique individual. He doesn't want to compromise that much. So he thinks he can do these things, but I think that it's been proven, if you just look at his record and his performances and some of his shortcomings, that maybe that's not the best way to go about it.
I was going to say, I mean, I think, we just have to kind of recognize the guy has some shortcomings that he has to figure out workarounds for, and he's got to find out the place where he can best do that. Obviously, he's got some power. We've seen over the course of his career, he can put some guys down, but he's also pretty slow for a welterweight. I think guys see his shots coming, especially because he does load up a little bit. And then you see issues with his strategy and his fight IQ. Donald Cerrone was trying to take him down in the fight, couldn't do it. And Mike Perry decided he was going to take him down, and everything kind of just went to hell after that. Not really a great decision there. Of course, we're saying that after the fact. I understand, like in the midst of chaos, you kind of do what you feel is right in the moment. But, was that the right move in the moment? Probably not. So there are things he's got to figure out workarounds for when it comes to how he approaches his training and his fighting. And I think this is going to be a pretty monumental decision for him as far as where he's going to end up, because welterweight has always been and always will be a shark tank. That's where just the bell curve of men fit in that division. So he's got a lot to make up for, and he's got a big momentous decision ahead of him.
I was super high on Mike Perry, and now I'm a little skeptical about how far he can go. And don't get me wrong, Demetrius Johnson was a great fighter, and he really turned the corner and became a great late in his career. Mike Perry can definitely do that, but those cases are not seen all that often. He is 27. He's not a 22, 23-year-old kid anymore. He is 27. He's had several losses. Yeah. And although he's shown improvement in his fights, it hasn't been significant enough, like an Israel Adesanya, who just looks like a complete different fighter from fight to fight. So I'm curious to see how far he can go in the sport. I feel like he might be one of these mid-level guys. I'm not sure what exactly his ceiling is at, but now I have questions after that Donald Cerrone performance. As far as what's next, I threw this out before. I'd like to see a fight with him and Thiago Alves. I think that'd be fun. A veteran, he's still around, and it's a good matchup for both.
I wonder if he kind of could fit in the sort of Matt Brown kind of role.
Yeah,
where
that's
I mean,
what
the
I'm
guy
feeling,
is.
yeah.
I mean, I have nothing bad to say about him. I mean, Mike Perry's a really courageous fighter. I mean, he goes in there. He obviously has a plan. He wants to throw hands, and he's ready to get into a firefight. He's a fun guy to watch, but. You know, will he ultimately fall into that area where he never quite makes that vault to like a top?
And that's why I'd like to see him go to a high level gym.
Yeah.
We know physically he's got all the attributes, and he's a very talented fighter. He's a fighter. He likes to fight, which that's very important. Plus, promotionally, he's great. I'd like to see him, as Chuck said, like in a steady camp. You know, I don't think the Jackson wink was a good fit for him, given all the drama, and he himself obviously said those things. Back in Florida, I don't know if at home, you know, he's got that.
He just has to find some stability one way or another. But it kind of does suck for a guy like that, because I think he has the tools outside of it. But it's funny how quirks fall, quirks in your backstory, and how people want to, if you're endearing or if you're offensive, those things kind of still hinge.
He's both at times, right?
He's both. But people give you the benefit of the doubt if you go in there and win. I think that people will, they would be more behind him in terms of his trajectory becoming a star in the sport if he wins. It still comes down to his wins and losses. I think he has to look at that pretty seriously, because if he just trades wins and losses from here on out for the next couple of years, I just feel like he'll be one of those weird, quirky guys that came through our sport and we thought, well, he's good, but we won't ultimately be watching him too critically in another 6 months or, you know, another loss or two. I think we might just be looking at him as one of those guys who never materialized the way we thought.
There's an interesting argument that I want to give credit to the person who brought it up to me. It was actually Chael Sonnen brought this up to me. What about the nature of 5-round fights? Now, of course, the Cerrone and Mike Perry fight was less than a round, but aforementioned Rodriguez and Chan Sung Jung went for the full 5. Here was the argument, as best I understood it, from Chael. He goes, look, I understand the fans love a 5-round fight, and I also understand it's just a more clarifying experience. He goes, but I got to tell you, man, those are the fights that make people less than what they are afterwards. And you look at a fight like this, and everyone was going out there and they were saying, oh, look at this picture. It's Chan Sung Jung and the El Pantera out there holding hands or whatever, like high-fiving in a hospital. And I'm like, yeah, the story is not the high five. They could high five in the living room of someone's house, in the back room, in the concourse, at a bar. The story is that they're both in hospital gurneys and hospital gowns because that fight royally effed them up. That is the kind of fight where you leave a piece of yourself. And you begin to think of it, you're like, think about what happened to Rory McDonald in that Lawler fight. Think about Lawler and Condit and what they did to each other. This is another example. You can go down the list. These 5-round fights are murdering these guys. This is just an intellectual exercise. I do not expect this to change. But Chuck, is there a case to be made to do away with 5-round fights?
I mean, what you just mentioned is exactly right. Obviously, a 5-round fight, we were talking a little bit about this earlier, like a 5-round fight is going to be more dangerous and more taxing than a 3-round fight. It's just the nature of it's the nature of the minutes, right? It's just math. 66% more of a fight. You know, it's like adding that much more to a fight. But, man, we've seen it so many times that guys show up in worse form after something like that, after a war. You mentioned a couple of them. I mean, but even JDS and Velasquez, guys like that, I remember, you just know that you're watching that. You know that they're leaving a piece of themselves when they're in there. So when you see a war like that, and I think this one certainly qualifies, that crosses my mind for sure. You're watching these guys and you're like, man, because you hadn't seen Korean Zombie, two times in 5 years. And even that's good for him, I guess, in this situation. But you're like, even that won't matter when you go through something like that. It's a mental thing. It's a physical thing. It's a brain thing. I think that all of that is very difficult. As far as just 5-round fights, I don't know about getting rid of them. I think that they should be. I still think that they should be the distinguishing marker, though, for championship fights. I mean, if you ascend to that level, that's the distinguishing marker. I think that I've always liked that. I've always liked that UFC had that, that MMA had that. What I don't really like is guys on short notice taking those fights as a main event and being thrust into a 5-round fight, because anybody who trains or does this stuff will tell you how difficult that is to wrap your mind suddenly. I went from a 3-round idea now to a 5-round fight. That's more dangerous than anything in my mind.
If you think about why most guys ultimately get into mixed martial arts and make that their career, like for a lot of them, it's sort of like a self-exploration, right? Like even if they don't admit it to themselves at the beginning, at some point they probably come to a realization that is the case. a 5-round fight allows you to sort of go there. Like, you have to dig as far down deep into yourself to like summon that courage. And to me, like, I mean, that's kind of the stuff of legend when you think about like these great boxing fights that happened, you know, in the 70s, and the George Foreman's and Rumble in the Jungle and all this stuff. And listen, there's obviously a physical toll to pay. There's probably even a mental toll to pay that could last the rest of your life. That's sort of the transaction that they make when they get into it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying it's just, but
You're not saying it's a good case to get rid of it. You're making the case to keep it.
I mean, I think there's a case either way. What I'd like to see is, I mean, I think fighters should be getting paid more to fight in a 5-round fight. It is more. Yeah. I mean, it's more taxing on your preparation. You have to now prepare for 25 minutes as opposed to 15. The preparation is different. This fight we talked about, you know, Yair Rodriguez pulling this off in the 5th round at elevation after a year and a half off on short notice.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Crazy.
I mean, that's to me. And so just to get the preparation to do that is amazing. Mm-hmm. To pull that off is absolutely amazing. And this is a fight they said, I mean, this fight will probably affect it for the rest of their lives. I remember being in Australia and watching Mark Hunt and Bigfoot Silva. Mm-hmm. 5 rounds.
You were there for that?
I was there for that. That is the most violent fight I've ever seen in person. I mean, my jaw was dropped watching these guys just throw and land bombs on each other. And that was the first time, other than maybe the John Jones Gustafsson fight, where I really felt in that moment, these guys will never be the same. As it was going on, I mean, it really like was hitting me.
That's why when they show those backstage or hospital shots, it's not so much you're like, oh, look at the camaraderie and the, you know, it's more that you're like, those dudes had a shared experience where they put each other through hell. They'll always be linked with that. You know what I mean? That's what I see. When I see that, I'm like, you just went through hell together, something you probably never want to do again in your life, but you know you might. You know what I mean? But it's like, you'll never want to do that again, but here you are saying, hey, we survived it. That's the way it looks to me.
What do you think, Danny? Is it a good idea or a bad idea?
I think I mean, I'm speaking from a fan point. I think it's a great idea.
Fans love it.
If it wasn't a 5-round fight, we wouldn't have gotten that crazy elbow KO that we've been talking about this on this episode, and we've been talking all week. I think that's what makes the difference between the preliminary guys and then the main eventers, right? The elite. But I do agree with you in the sense that they do need to get paid more for 5 rounds. Why? Just out of the simple definition, you get paid to put on a performance. You're putting on more. You're out there literally displaying an extra 10 minutes of work, so you should get compensated for that. And we know they do leave a piece of themselves in there, and they're aware of that. I think, you know, the very first fighter that actually said something, and exactly just that, Dustin Poirier, at least that comes to mind when he fought Justin Gaethje. He's like, oh, I know I'm going to leave a piece of myself in there. I know I'm not going to be the same guy after I walk out of there. But that's okay, because this is what I'm here for. So I'm all in for 5-round fights. They're amazing. That's what makes legends. But they do need to get compensated for more.
I had Chad Mendes on my radio show this week, and I asked him, what was the toughest fight you've been in? It was the second Aldo fight, right? He's like, oh, by a million miles. And I was like, how banged up were you? And he said that he pissed blood that night, and that he couldn't walk. He had to literally be helped into the bed. Like, he couldn't physically contract his muscles to sit and then turn into the sheets. They had to open up the sheets, pull his legs into the bed. I said, how much would it cost for you to get back to that point, right? And he was like, bro, $1 million isn't even close enough. Yeah. That's what he told me, right? So here's a rule on 5-round fights. It's just an intellectual exercise we're having here. I don't presume that either should or could get rid of them. However, number one, I think paying them more is an absolute necessity. I mean, dude, how much did Yair Rodriguez make for that fight? Do we even know?
Sure.
Right, exactly. There was no headlines about his pay. Right, that's just take one. Number two, to the extent that there can be limits on it, like for a short notice or something, maybe there kind of should be, because I just feel like at all times you have to do what's right for the sport and what's right for the fans. Mm-hmm. But you have to take into consideration the humanity of these guys, even when they don't take into consideration
that's what I was going to say.
Their own.
Yes, because there are guys who will take that beating for 5 rounds. They will not quit. And that's the problem. There's a pattern. Sometimes you'll see a pattern established.
For nothing.
Yes, that's what I mean. You'll see the pattern established. But there's this guy who just is not going to quit. And if this corner's not going to quit, then if he's sticking around because he's competitive, he's just doing enough to not make it so the referee will not stop it. Those are the worst ones, those 5-round one-sided fights where the guy just won't quit.
JDS King.
Yeah. I mean, you see them sometimes and you're just like, you can tell by the second round, you're like, ooh, there's 5 rounds of this. You know what I mean? Unless he finishes, and you're like, there's 5 rounds of this. And those are the ones that they parlay exactly into what you're saying. You're like, it turns into a humanity issue. You're watching something, you're like, please don't let him go through 5 rounds like that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, why did St. Pierre wrestle the last chapter of his career? Gee, I can't figure it out. He had 5-round fight after 5-round fight, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, so let's transition now to the next topic. We had mentioned UFC Denver, and everyone's like, you didn't mention Cowboy. Don't worry, I wanted to save it. I want to talk about this proposed or rumored Conor fight in just a minute, but let's circle back to Cowboy if we can. Danny, what do you make of what he put on? You can say whatever you want about Mike Perry's decision-making. He's still a tough customer.
Oh, yeah.
And he just went in there and did what he did, pulled his son out of there. I mean, I was saying this earlier. I have so much respect for Cowboy for all the reasons that we all do. He is the embodiment of like everything a fighter should be in terms of what the fans want. We want a guy who doesn't ask a lot of questions, who is legitimately skilled. You don't want, people say they want a brawler, but they actually do want somebody who brawls and is skilled and just is active. For a guy, I think it's so important that the guy who has the title for the most wins and the most finishes was never a champion. He didn't carefully manicure his way through the garden. He just rushed through the bushes and got torn up along the way, but he made it to the other side. I have so much respect for him.
Yeah. This was like a vintage Cowboy performance. And also, like, the lead up, he just seems different. He's talked about how he feels different having now a son. And this win was crucial. I know he was going back down to 155, or at least that's what he says, and I guess we're going to talk about that pretty soon. But it was important because for a bit, he had a rough stretch, his past few losses. Like, people are wondering, where is Cowboy at? And I think with that Mike Perry performance, we found out he's still a very game guy. You can't write him off just yet, and he's still a contender if he does decide to drop down to 155.
Any quick thoughts on his impressive win?
I mean, I just mirror everything you said. I mean, he's just been the prototypical. If you want to like chart a path for like what you want a UFC fighter to be, this is the guy. I mean, I wrote a column about him earlier this week on MMA Fighting. If anybody wants to go back and check it out, but I mean, to me, he just embodies, he sort of pulls together the eras of like anyone, anytime, anywhere, but also being able to like talk trash and do all like the things that we want out of a modern fighter. Take any fight, put in front of him, be able to fight in pretty much any style. Whether you want to strike with him, you can put together 4-piece combos. That Rick Story, that incredible combo that he put together in that fight is a great example. He's obviously great on the ground as well. So like this is a guy that's capable of just doing anything. His versatility, both in the octagon and out of the octagon. I mean, to me, he's like a legendary fighter, regardless of whether he got a title or not. And that says a lot about the guy. He didn't even need a title to get to this record and make himself like a figure that would.
I mean, he is a fighter, and he's one of those guys who likes to blow his money and all this stuff. So it's like he kind of needs the fighting to keep up with his lifestyle and stuff. I mean, he's went through so many different iterations, but for a guy like that we were basically shoveling some dirt on this last episode, to come through in the clutches like that in Denver during that show. Denver being one of his home, I guess. Where also that was the same venue where Melvin Gillard almost knocked him out right away, and he came back. I mean, he has good performances in Denver. I just thought it was really awesome, man. Especially being the father and all the stuff he was doing there. I just thought that this was his back against the wall more than it's ever been, and I thought he came through in flying colors. And again, and now he's talking about 155. You talk about a guy who knows how to keep brushing the dust off himself and putting himself into vital positions. It's him. He's been awesome at that his whole career.
All right, so Danny, I'll go back to you on this one. So the rumored fight. Cowboy was asked after the win by the media who might be next, and he's like, the UFC didn't even offer me a date. They offered me a name for the first time ever. Wouldn't say who. Then he takes to social media, and he appears to suggest that it's Conor. Now, we don't know to what extent this fight is actually going to be made. Suppose that it might. First of all, I find it hilarious that when everyone goes up a weight class, we're always like, see, you don't have to fight your lower weight class. You can go up a weight class. And then when they go back down, there's no word about like, actually, when you go back down, there's a lot of benefits too. Yeah. So, sorry, weight cutting has a role to play, and it's a good one. All right. Now, that aside, it could be Conor McGregor. I will just open up the floor to you and say from a broad perspective, do you like this fight? Is it a good idea? Where do you come down on this?
I'm all in. Take my money. This is a perfect fight for both guys, for all parties. Look, Conor McGregor, He's been fighting at the top for a while. Donald Cerrone, by no means is a tune-up fight, but he's probably the closest thing you can get to a tune-up fight within the UFC.
Wow.
In the sense of
right after we revere him.
No, this guy's amazing. He's a tune-up.
no, I'm not saying he's a tune-up fight. I'm saying within the elite, because Conor McGregor is not going to fight a guy like Dennis Seaver again. He's not going to fight guys in the lower ranking. Donald Cerrone, he's a fantastic fighter. Don't get me wrong, but he's not up there with Khabib Nurmagomedov and all these guys at the very top. He could get there, right? So I think this is both a good matchup for Conor, but a good matchup also for Donald Cerrone. Conor McGregor needs his whole brand. He became who he is based off picking his shots, and not only that, but winning. Calling his shots, I'm going to win here. Yeah. And in the last few years, we've just seen him take L's. And I think he's as big as he's ever been as far as his brand, but I think there's questions as far as how elite he is as a fighter. If you would have put, Donald Cerrone's fighting Conor McGregor right after the Eddie Alvarez fight, everybody would have been like, no way, that's not even, Conor McGregor is just going to run through him. If you put that fight now, I don't know, I think Donald Cerrone could very well win that fight. So after seeing Conor McGregor take losses to Floyd Mayweather, Habib, the layoff, issues with the law, there's questions about where he is as far as like a fighter. Is he only just for the money, or where is he at as an elite fighter? And I think Donald Cerrone will answer just that, because Donald Cerrone, if anything, the only people that beat Donald Cerrone are elite fighters. No scrub, no mid-level fighter beats Donald Cerrone, and that's proven because he's very solid. And as far as on the Donald Cerrone side, the dude has done everything for the company, has all the records, right? Super good with the fans as far as like delivering us great performances. He needs a payday. Yeah. Not only that, but take all that out and just put the context of what he's done to the health of MMA as a sport. This is the guy that's willing to take all up-and-comers, man. And he's willing to serve that role to platform and catapult other youngsters into stardom, sort of as the Darren Till. So if anyone deserves a big money fight is Donald Cerrone. It's also a very competitive fight, and it serves good purposes for both fighters.
What are some of the
I'm all in.
I'm just kidding.
There's nothing left to say. Danny just completed a filibuster over here.
Make it happen, UFC.
Didn't the idea for this sort of came out of nowhere? I mean, was this fight ever on the radar at all? Like, Connor's called out like 8,000 people.
Like the Go Big, there was a little bit of swell up. The Go Big conference when they were kind of going back and forth. That was the only time I remember there being.
But I mean, it's been a series of cascading things, right? Like Connor's like, I want the rematch, but I'll take another fight. So you're like, okay, well now we can take another fight. Then Cerrone wins, and he's open. You're thinking, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
And let's not forget they had a little back and forth at that one press conference.
Yeah, talking about the Go Big presser.
Yeah, Go Big presser. Yeah.
Does anyone remember what he said? I don't remember that at all.
Something disparaging, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still trying to warm up to this ideal. I mean, I like it.
So you don't like it that much?
Well, I didn't hype
do
you
like
up.
it.
Yeah,
What the hell? He didn't convince you?
My eyes just glazed over. I haven't been on in a while, so I was like, "Danny, stop talking so I can say
Last time
something."
he was on, the Cowboys fighting in WEC, so it's been a bit.
Yeah, that's right.
We just had a baby cowboy hat back then. I do like the ideal on the surface. I'm just trying to figure out if it actually makes sense. Since Cowboy spent most of his recent career at welterweight, and Conor's kind of been boxing and doing all these other things, I'm like, they kind of both seem like they're coming from two totally different places, and that's my only objection to it, which is a mild one. I mean, I think it'll be a super fun fight, and if it is signed, I'm sure it'll get very interesting between them. So I could see why the UFC's into the.
No matter what happens, it almost feels like it's always a subtweet against Nate Diaz, right? Like it's like Diaz sitting there thinking the trilogy might be going to materialize. I'm guessing that this is one of the thoughts in there. Maybe it still does. But then Cowboy comes in because it's kind of a similar type fight, right? It doesn't have any real title connotation. It's just they're going to fight because, can you imagine those two guys fighting?
Yes, authentic fan favorite versus
Exactly.
Conor. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm like, and again, we've talked about this a million times. Conor McGregor is he's in a different sphere. It's like you have to just kind of understand that everything he does is kind of it doesn't have to have complete logic. It's like he's outside the orbit of the meritocracy. He's outside the orbit of the paradigm, the things that we're so used to. He just doesn't, none of it really matters to him in this weird way because he's already held two titles. So if that's a fight he wants, and I would look at it from the Cowboy perspective too. The guy has been around. He's done this. I think he's a fan favorite. He's, he wants to go back to 155. I'm like, I like it on that level. I like it on the level of fans are not going to complain. It's going to be a good fight. It'll be a nice lead up. They'll deliver. But if Conor McGregor wants, I don't like if they're playing at the Conor McGregor. This has something to do with the title picture because they will do that. They will present it like this still matters to the title picture because he's involved. But I'm like, to
Why-
me, Cowboy
why
Cerrone,
why
because
wouldn't
Cowboy
that be a-
Cerrone has lost 4 or 5 going into this fight, and he was doing it in a different weight class, but he left lightweight basically because he wasn't doing so well there either. So my point is, like, he is not a guy who comes in and you make him an automatic springboard to a title shot. That's looking at it the old way, but
I
I'm like,
generally agree with you. However, he left lightweight after losing to Dos Anjos in a title fight.
that's true. It's true. I'm not saying he's.
granted, it was
but he
2015,
has
so-
lost 4 out of 5, and I think that as a welterweight,
That's a fair point.
I just think that it shouldn't be title picture type stuff.
Let me
and
tell
I'm
you
like, I'm willing to accept it on that level
Yeah.
too, because I'd be like, hey, McGregor's already done all that, so let him do those kind of
For
things.
all the reasons you guys like it, I like it too. I would say there's one thing that I like it. I don't love it. Like, how do I say this? I like it because it's grand stakes. Imagine a world where this fight gets made, and imagine that McGregor loses. Now imagine he loses badly. Like, let's say he gets stopped in a round or two. I don't think that's likely. I think McGregor will win. I think that's part of the reason why he might take this fight, to your point. But let's imagine that happens. Now what?
Right.
Whoa. You're talking about him being at the peak of his powers. You lose to Cerrone,
Right.
and you can call this day an inflection point, and he will go right back down. To me, one of the reasons why I like it is it's favorable to Conor, but it's risky as hell for him to come out and take another. This is why in boxing, all those guys at this stage, time for a tune-up. Time to go back, take a fight in a country where no one's really looking, beat up some club fighter, and then get back on the horse. I think it'll get that opportunity. They're trying to make something of it with this Cerrone fight. You lose that one, dude, and you are talking about damage to your global brand. That's kind of why I like it, too.
I mean, that fight would answer all these questions, the ones that I'm saying. Is Conor McGregor still a world-class fighter, right? Because after he beat Eddie Alvarez, there was no doubt he was one of the greatest. Like, you're like, oh, that's one of the greatest lightweights. Maybe, maybe not the greatest, but definitely up there. Now at this point, with all the losses that he's taken, all the bad publicity, there's questions about that. Where is his mental state? Plus, you see him taking a devastating loss to Khabib, and he's still out there going to football games, with the
He
Cowboys
handles
and having
himself
fun.
brilliantly in his losses.
Yeah, going to
All
Migos
of them,
concerts. So I want to see where his head is at as far as fighting goes.
Throws a tight spiral. That's what I saw. It's a tight
He doesn't even
spiral.
use the laces.
I heard it, yeah, that was a good
He
throw.
throws a better spiral than most NFL players punch. So
Yeah.
Fair point. Fair point. I'm just teasing. I mean, what do you expect? All right. So let's do this. There is a UFC event. There's a billion UFC events coming. The next one is going to be in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Have you been to Argentina?
No, never. I'm so jealous. Guillermo Cruz is out there
I know.
posting photos with some nice steak.
Is he out there?
Yeah, did you know that?
I didn't even know he was
Wow,
out
I'm
there.
glad you're really tuned into the
I don't
site's
really pay
coverage, Chuck. He's out there posting pictures of, he's like, fight week got started early, and it's this giant grill with grilled
I
meats all
told him I
over
might
it.
have some steak for me with chimichurri and a
Oh,
nice
man.
glass of wine.
He is a gaucho out there right now. All right, so good. By the way, this is a small little detail. You guys might not know this, but the biggest rivalry in Argentine soccer is River Plate versus Boca Juniors. And they were supposed to, hold on, hear me out. They were supposed to play on a certain, hold on. They were supposed to play on a certain day, and it got rained out. They almost put it.
I did hear
They
this.
almost put it on this Saturday. Let me tell you something. That would have
That would've
been
been a
an
disaster.
epic disaster. I can't explain to you. It's like the Yankees versus the Mets on steroids. There's no equivalent to it in American sports at all. They got lucky. They put it the next day, and all's fine. So they're going to be in, I forget the name of the arena.
Luna Park.
Is that what it is?
Luna Park.
Luna Park, yep. So they're going to have some interesting fights on there. Mike, I'll go with you on this one. Start with the main event. Santiago Ponzinibbio, something of a rising sensation. A guy, a trilinguist, by the way. He can do English, Portuguese, and Spanish,
good,
obviously. In his native Argentina, that's where they're going to be holding this. The UFC's gone to Latin America a lot of times. Very rarely do they get to match somebody who is not just like generally Latino. They've got an Argentine in Argentina. I do think that matters. Taking on a very tough guy, Neil Magny. I think it's like 9-10 here in his welterweight fight. A, what do you like about it? What do you hate about it? And two, what are the stakes here?
Well, I think this is sort of a bellwether fight for Ponzinibbio here. He's been on a nice streak lately. He's won 6 in a row. But he's also, I think he's 32 years old now, so he's not a young guy anymore, right? So I think he's kind of hit the part of his career where he needs to make that jump. And Neil Magny is a guy that, he's a tough fighter. I mean, he's a tough guy to look good against, right?
He's got to win against Gastelum, right? Like he's
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, he's a guy that, like, even if you beat him, you have to work for it. You're probably not going to look great. I mean, he is a guy that is tough to beat and tough to look good against. So if Ponzinibbio can go in there, look like a star in front of his home country, right? Get that, hopefully that home country reception and go out there and win. I mean, this is a fight that could potentially propel him into the second half.
I love a guy like this in this situation, right? Because Ponzinibbio has been around. He's since located, I think, relocated to Florida, right, where he's been training. But he's still, obviously, he's from Argentina. There's a tailor-made event for him to shine. I like that because this is a guy who's been, like a plateau. Even though he's winning, I don't feel like his star is rising or anything. He's not really making any movement. You put him in his own backyard and you get the fans to give him one of those type of events, and he shines well in this fight, especially against a tough guy like Neil Magny.
Yeah.
You're creating something. That's what I want to see. I want to see them doing
And
that.
that's been the formula, like going for the UFC for a long time, like going into these markets that have been sort of underserved over time. They did it with George St. Pierre in Canada. They did it with Anderson Silva in Brazil a long time ago. Mark Hunt in Australia, Conor in Ireland. I mean, they look to find this guy that they can sort of hang the promotion on. And so he's getting a golden opportunity here, right? This is all you can ask for as a fighter, to fight in front of your home crowd. It is a lot of pressure, absolutely, to go in there and do that. And again, fight a guy who is just a really tough nightmare matchup, like anywhere you go. But they have set him up as best that they can to push himself to that next level.
And this is round 2 because he was supposed to headline UFC Chile.
Right.
And he had to withdraw due to injury, and then it was Kamaru Usman versus Damian Maia. So he was supposed to get that sort of big star push on that card. He didn't get it, but now he's getting, I guess, a better version because this is actually in Argentina. Chile and Argentina are hotbeds for MMA in South America, outside of Brazil, obviously, which is the biggest. And, this is a big opportunity for him because he's shown he's a world-class fighter. He's shown he's got the skills. Now let's see how he can come off, in front of his home crowd. I know, for example, Stipe fighting in Cleveland, that did wonders for him. I remember the Leech defeating Zach Otto in China. He came off as a huge superstar. And that's what Santiago Ponzinibbio needs because, he speaks 3 languages. He's a world-class. Now he needs that sort of stardom, push, and he can get that if he gets past Neil Magny.
I wasn't expecting a Zach Otto reference on that.
Yeah, that's good. He's got
Nice
hardcore
work.
I think it's infectious, though, when you see a crowd, and I'm hoping this happens for Ponzinibbio, because I feel like the crowd will probably embrace him and give him that hero's welcome. And I think that translates. It's infectious to see. Yeah. You see that person differently from that moment on. We've seen it in all the GSP fighting in Montreal was always a spectacle by itself because the place would go crazy for him. I hope that he gets that, a very nice reception there, and then that helps kind of translate for him as well.
Yeah, the UFC's trying to create stars. They have an opportunity here if Ponzinibbio does the right things, obviously, inside of the cage. So I think there's more at stake for Ponzinibbio than Neil Magny.
Yeah.
Neil Magny has already gotten some high-profile fights and has beaten some high-profile guys as well. And he's sort of been, going up and down in the welterweight division. Ponzinibbio hasn't done that. He's just been going up. And we haven't seen him cross
He's going
that,
up in terms of his
plateau.
wins and his performance. He looks great, but I don't feel like he's moving the needle at all. So this is one of those moments where they can actually kick it into gear.
It's that same situation. That welterweight division is just, it's always been bonkers. And to really break through, I mean, it takes a lot. I mean, 6 wins in a row is a great streak. And, he really hasn't made too much of a dent in, like, the public consciousness. So getting a main event spot, obviously, people get to see his name at the top of the card. And hopefully, he gets that reception.
Use that mic well afterwards, too, you know what I mean?
I don't know a lot about the Argentinian MMA scene. Like,
it's very robust.
Sell out.
In Spanish-speaking Latin America, it might be the best.
So,
it's between Argentina or Chile.
Okay. So
taking a long time to get down there, man.
It's going to be on Fox Deportes down there. Like, it's a big
Doesn't Ponzinibbio do some commentary for television?
He does, He does commentary for
UFC
Espanol. Very good. In my opinion, I think he's the best. And I think there's something about Argentines because for soccer, usually the best commentators are the Argentinians. They have an Italian thing going on, but at the same time it's in Spanish.
That's funny.
He kills it when it comes to his analysis. He does a great job. Yeah, he does it for all the events, basically like the UFC Espanol ones. Like,
they're Spaniards who think they're Italian, and you know what?
Yeah, basically.
They're super arrogant, but.
That's
it's just a reality. One other detail on this card that I wanted to get to is the return of Cynthia Calvillo, and I know it tilts everyone when I pronounce it correctly. I'm sorry. In any event, she is back on this card, taking on, what's her name? Poliana Botello. Yeah. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that one incorrectly. She had this long weed suspension. She was rushed through and was having a bunch of wins, ran into a bit of a roadblock in her last one. Then she sits out for a while. They're bringing her back in Latin America, which I don't think is a bad choice because you want as many Spanish speakers on that card as possible, and so that's a great thing. On the other hand, though, I'm like, I don't know. Like, where does she go from here? It's a nice win over a decorated person on the other side of Earth. It's good for Santiago Ponzinibbio because even if he never becomes a pay-per-view star, he can still be. If you can just be a star somewhere, you are valuable to the UFC.
For sure.
I don't know. I'm not saying it's the wrong move. But what do you guys think? Is this the right way to bring her back?
I mean, for me, I guess I don't have a big problem with it. I feel like it's fine. Her opponent, what's her name again? I'm sorry. I remember watching her fight. I just don't know her name, but she's looked pretty good. Nova União, like she's definitely formidable enough. But fighting, I mean, I would like to have seen her in the States, I guess, if you had your druthers. But it really comes down to kind of sneaking her back into play in a weird way because it is a weird suspension and everything. She was on the verge of being Fighter of the Year last year. People forget that. You know, she was 4-0 going into that Esparza fight, and I think that it's one of those. It's just one of those situations where she loses the fight, and it was not the greatest fight ultimately, but then this whole thing happens, and you're revving her back up. I don't mind the slow play, or if she's able to kind of go in there and maybe steal the show. You never know. She does have that in her to be able to do something like that. So
talk about steal the show, though, isn't it? I mean, we're looking at it from the Calvillo point of view, isn't it?
Get the ball rolling.
Her suspension was 9 months, right?
Yeah, her suspension.
And it's been 11 months since that fight.
Yeah. So at this point, you just want her to get a fight. Yeah. So
she needs to win. That strawweight division is picking up some steam, man.
Yeah, true. She does have
great. Macy Barber last week looked amazing. Yeah. So you don't want to be left behind. Train's leaving the station.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
She's looked good. I mean, she basically last year she was out Neil Magny. I mean, 5 fights. That's what Neil Magny's known for, is just taking all these fights in a year.
Yeah.
She was doing that, and she was just cruising up until that. So I'm kind of anxious to see what she does, man. I mean, she was fun. She was fun last year, so
all right.
Been a while.
All right, time now for our last segment of the show. I did not forget it. I'm getting better about it.
We're not done?
No, it's called Under the Radar, a story that is interesting, potentially important, but that just kind of sailed by. I have to say, for a week filled with news, this is like the best week for Under the Radar news. There were a million stories that I saw. I was like, wow, that's interesting, and they just kept flying through. So, Chuck, we'll start on that end. We'll work our way forward. Give me a story that was under the radar this week.
Well, man, I got to go with the guy who's fighting on the same card that we're talking about down in Argentina. I think his name is pronounced Ian Heinisch. And he's a guy who wrote this Player Tribune feature that came out, I believe, today. And it is one of the most remarkable stories, honestly, that this guy is fighting in the UFC, much less that he's alive or he's doing anything. This is a guy who was muling drugs from Spain to Colombia, and he was on the lam, essentially. He was a refugee, came back to America, ended up doing time in Rikers Island, was almost stabbed. Go and read that story. He's fighting Cesar Fajeda. But I wanted to hear his Mutanchi. So he's fighting him this week. That's a good fight. You know, that's a tough guy to have to fight over there. But obviously, a guy with a backstory like that, man, that's what makes the fight game so crazy.
Great one.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to point out somebody who was supposed to be fighting on this card in Argentina this weekend, Alessio Di Chirico. Carrico.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be fighting Jared Cannonier this week. Jared Cannonier got moved to UFC 230 to fight Dave Branch. Di Chirico is still sitting waiting for an opponent. UFC, get this guy an opponent. When you take an opponent away, you have to reschedule him quickly.
You need to see that.
This guy goes into camp, spends his money. You know, take a toll on yourself going into camp. And to have a guy sit there waiting, it's not fair. Give the guy a fight.
Good point.
How much are you weighing now? Can you, just kidding. My under the radar story is Benson Henderson signed a new deal with Bellator.
Yeah. Good one.
Apparently
he fought his first 2 fights, he fought his first 2 fights at lightweight within Bellator, Michael Chandler and then Patricky, right? He fought those fights with a torn ACL. And so he went, got surgery, got that fixed, and now he's on a 2-fight win streak, submission win over Roger Huerta, and then he just recently beat Saad Awad. I believe it was a decision. Mm-hmm. So he signs a new deal. For some reason, I feel like Benson Henderson hasn't had his moment yet at Bellator, and I think it's still coming. I'm not just ready to write him off yet. I think there's something in
store for him. Just don't start the new deal fighting Koreshkov, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, just don't go up in weight class and you'll be all right. But
he got close with Chandler. Yeah. He got close, but he didn't quite turn the corner on that one. That's a good one. Man, there's a million ones. How about the fact that there's a Bellator event in Israel?
Yeah.
Did anyone? Yeah, and by the way, the main event is great. It's Patricio Pitbull versus, as you mentioned, El Matador. Emmanuel Sanchez. Phil Davis is on the card.
I know.
He's not even the co-main event.
I know.
I believe Royce Gracie's son is on that card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is.
And so I think Ryan Couture's on it as well.
Yes.
Haim Ghazali. Yeah, it's
Look at Bellator on right after the 25th anniversary, sneaking all the original icons in there on their card. Their sons,
Couture's the Gracie,
next
yeah.
generation.
so that's a crazy one, but that's not my under the radar. I wanted to put this out there. I tweeted it yesterday because I just found this so delightful.
Is he doing 200 the Raiders? Are we allowed to do that?
Yeah, you can go. You can give me like an appetizer
Can I
one
just
on
say
this
happy
one.
7th birthday to my daughter, Kira?
Yes, please say it. This is a hip hop station, all of apparently. We give shout outs to
I'm
daughters.
probably going to be on for another 3 years, Luke. I got to get in when I can.
Fair
We should
play.
be 10 the next time.
Fair play. So here's my under the radar. Very quickly, I tweeted this out yesterday. There were two scientists. They work in the Netherlands. I don't know if they're Dutch because their names did not appear to be Dutch. But neither here nor there. Here's what they wanted to figure out. Of the 23 classes of substances on WADA's prohibited list, these are the things now you cannot take. Now, there's not 23 substances. There's 23 classes. And inside of there could be many substances. Of those 23 classes, how many of them actually have robust evidence that shows that the substances listed inside those classes are actually performance enhancing? So they went through and they reviewed the evidence. Here's what they found. Of the 23 classes, a whopping 5, only 5, have good evidence. Now, these are ones you would imagine them to be: anabolic agents, beta-2 agonists, stimulants, glucocorticoids, and beta blockers. By the way, half of these things are like, it's like half the things you find in like Brock Lesnar's blood, right? All right. Here's the point, though. One additional class, growth hormone, which, by the way, is still banned, has similar evidence, but only in untrained subjects. The observed effects all relate to strength or sprint performance. There are no studies showing positive effects or reliable markers for endurance performance. For 11 classes, no well-designed studies are available. And for the remaining 6 classes, there is actually evidence of an absence of a positive effect. In conclusion, for the majority of substance classes, no convincing evidence for performance enhancement is available, while for the remaining classes, the evidence is based on a total of 266 subjects from 11 studies. Yeah, keep ruining guys' careers from very limited evidence. I'm sure that's a good idea.
That's why they'll never take my corticosteroids away from me.
I mean, it's just, everyone thinks that like there's these like scientists with these long beards and these nice lab coats somewhere in Switzerland with mountains of evidence putting together this list. It's a bunch of monkeys on typewriters in someone's basement. All right, enough of that. Let's do this. Time for the second part here of the show. We call it After the Beat. We have taken your tweets, and they are with the hashtag the MMA Beat, and then we appreciate everyone who sent them in. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get to your questions. We're going to do that right now. All right, we're back. Time for After the Beat. Luke Thomas, Danny Segura, Mike Chiappetta, and at the end, the man in the hat, that is Chuck Mindenhall. As I mentioned, we have taken your tweets using the hashtag the MMA Beat. We appreciate all of them, and we are going to answer them now. Boys, I have good news for you. They're all terrible.
All right.
So here we go. No, I'm teasing. They're good.
I just said we appreciate them.
Mike, once again, you will go first. Should fighters in divisions with less popular champions be concerned that their division can suddenly be on the chopping block?
Less popular champions. Well, I don't think so. I mean, when you look at the way the UFC constructs their calendar, everything centers around putting championship fights in main events. And from the looks of what the calendar is going to be next year with this new ESPN contract and pay-per-view schedule, it seems like we're going to have about the same number of events going forward in 2019. So we're going to need champions. And so you can't be getting rid of multiple weight classes when you have to fill these cards. So I don't see any change.
Can you imagine just because Woodley is not the most popular champion? No more welterweight.
And by the way,
that thing out.
Is it possible that they do this thing where, like, if Henry Cejudo wins or TJ Dillashaw wins, that they keep the 125 belt and just have one-off fights with it the same way because
like
Chris
a-
Cyborg
yeah,
145 division
They'll
exists?
dissolve it probably. I mean, unless there's some
I'm
kind
just
of
saying they could if they want to keep this
I don't
belt.
think the question was asked quite right. It was like less popular champ. Everyone's pinning this on Demetrius. Show me the other flyweight.
No,
that's
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I think that the bigger problem here is I don't really believe Dana White was ever really, truly behind. We talked about this before, but I don't think he was ever truly behind the 125-pound division, to be honest. I mean, and, you know, it feels like they never quite knew what to do with it. And we're just at a point where they're like, what they want to get out of their fighters has changed. Maybe the model has changed enough where they could basically do it. I also think that at some point we're looking at 165-pound division. I know that you talked to a matchmaker, right, at some point or something where they were like, we can't introduce a new weight class. There's too many weight classes at that point.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I mean, there's all those factors in play, but ultimately, I'm like, I just don't feel like Dana White I don't feel like the UFC was ever really behind flyweight.
Yeah, I think this was a special case for the flyweight division, and I also think if the UFC is going to do any trimming of divisions, it's going to be at the ends. I don't think there's going to be a hole in the middle, like it's just going to go from 155 to 185. So that's why the flyweight division was a special case, and they're never going to cut the heavyweights. So.
And bantamweight is too rich. I mean, they've got too many guys that are just so good that, I mean, it's not going to happen there. I think that the only one that we'd probably consider at this point, other than maybe women's featherweight or something like that, would be that division.
And when they got rid of lightweight, to your point, Danny, back in whatever year that was, I can't even remember, 2007, whatever it was. Before that,
2004.
Was it 4? It was the after the Thompson Eves Edwards fight. I can't remember when that was anymore. Whatever. That was also at the time the lowest weight class. So they're not like skipping spots in the middle.
Yeah.
But I will say, if you have a whole weight class of people that they feel like they can't promote, whether they should be able to, you never know.
Yeah.
Next. Okay, Danny, would you rather have the Brock Lesnar sword tattoo on your chest or have the damage? By the way, it's the MMA Beat hashtag, not MMA Beat, but we appreciate the question just the same.
Jesus.
What would you rather have?
Do the combo platter, baby.
I mean, at that point, you just got to get both, right? I don't know. I think I'll go with the damage.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Really?
Sword.
Yeah, the sword doesn't really look much of a sword.
The
so
sword too
have
is harder to hide. Like if you have your shirt open, you got some weird stuff peeking out.
Yeah.
So the damage you can hide that at least.
We're sitting here embracing the damage. I think I'd have to go with the sword. I mean, the damage. Can you imagine? I guess either one of the.
He did say you have to get it in the same exact spot, right?
Oh no, that was
Can I get the?
That was
I mean,
the
it
whole
was
thing.
it was sort of implied, but to your point on technicality, you're right. He didn't specify.
There you go. If I can get them anywhere, I'm getting both.
Does anybody else here have tattoos?
I don't.
No,
I do.
You do? I'm getting another one on Saturday. I'm finally going to get a tattoo on my forearm. Can you believe that? I'm 39. You know, I'm reasonably financially stable. Societal standards have changed. I would be covered right now if it wasn't for that.
You're saying you'd be like Lil Peep with tattoos all over your face.
Yeah, I'll be like Tekashi 6ix9ine. But like, how much more
guy
could my
from Saw right here, like
like how much more disappointed could my father be in me? Probably not anymore. So like at this point, I've exhausted his disappointment. F it, time to get some tattoos. All right, next.
Get the damage.
Get the damage. All right, let's see, Chuck. When one announces let's say their U.S. television deal, which is highly rumored, do you see them potentially taking the number 2 spot behind UFC, or do you think there's already too much saturation with UFC, Bellator, PFL, LFA, etc.?
I mean, it is fairly saturated, but I honestly think that right now Bellator is entrenched. I know that one is bringing in some compelling guys. I think that individual fights will see them, but they don't have more names than Bellator, and Bellator has more North American events, obviously. I don't know if one has plans to come over here and do some events, kind of like Pride did at 33, and a couple of those.
That went well.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Well, it was a good event.
Yeah, the event was cool, but I mean, I don't really think that. I think that it's because it's an Asian-based, Singapore-based promotion, and they do most of their stuff overseas. It's just that's still the big factor. They have weird hours over here, everything else. So I still think Bellator is.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if they're going to run most of their business overseas and just come here once in a while, it's going to be hard to unseat Bellator just because we're just used to what we see in front of us all the time. I mean, that's just human nature.
I think certain events could probably do better than Bellator's, and maybe even the UFC, especially if you get guys like Eddie Alvarez there, Demetrius Johnson.
Depends where their TV deal goes, too.
Yeah, that too.
The deal is just DAZN. It's great for DAZN customers, but that doesn't mean anything for the North American market per se. I have to say this. Here's the one thing that's like MMA fans get confused about. It's like, first of all, there's no way they'll unseat Bellator. Not anytime soon. It would take a Herculean effort. Forget UFC. It would take a Herculean effort to unseat Bellator. Their whole product is designed around Asian sensibilities, Asian gym recruitment, and it's maybe good for those markets. It doesn't mean F all here. And you can sign Demetrius, and you can sign Eddie Alvarez. These are phenomenal fighters, but that's not going to change. Even if you have them both in the same card, it's not. This is not going to do anything. So I hope they get on DAZN because that would be good as a DAZN customer. I would prefer to see it. But my point is, a lot of MMA fans are like, oh, one had a nice week of publicity, and now all of a sudden people think, wow, they might be doing something. They are so far from doing anything in this market, it's not even funny. Like, they're not even remotely an entity at all. Here's how you know. Turn on your local sports station on the radio and wait until you hear anything MMA related. Guarantee you it's probably not going to be Bellator, and if it was going to be when Kimbo was around, and that was it. You might hear UFC once on the week. You might. Right. Now just look at the pecking order where they are. They're not even in the solar system, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of sports entities here, even as MMA-related ones.
Yeah, but they got Misha Tate on board now. So
look, they're doing good things in their market. I'm not here to diminish them as an entity generally.
I agree with you 100%.
But, like, their footprint here, it might as well be non-existent.
Yeah.
I just want to congratulate you the way DAZN comes off your tongue.
Yeah, now it does.
You were not an early adopter.
Danny do it.
You know what's amazing about DAZN? It's like, let's take a step.
Tell me, Luke.
Hold on. It's amazing. They've got Anthony Joshua in their ranks. They had Usyk, that fight they had last week. They've got Canelo in their ranks. Combate Americas, Bellator. They're going to have KSW. I'm sure I'm not even mentioning half the shows. They have like 5 properties now.
Road FC, I think they picked up.
Road FC they have, right? So they're slowly beginning to do a bunch of amazing things.
Yeah.
They're, as a boxing fan, I would pay for DAZN just on what they have. Forget all the extra MMA stuff, and like they're going to be adding more and more and more. It's like, wow, what a great company, dude. They do great media outreach. It's amazing.
Yep, they do.
It's like you just have the world's dumbest name. I don't know what to tell you. And I heard, apparently someone told me that I guess one of the DAZN reps was either here or at SiriusXM, and they're like, yeah, we picked that name intentionally to get attention. It's like, dude, I could name your company like Pedophile Creeps Incorporated. People are like, that's the name of your television company? It would get attention. It's still a terrible name. You know what I'm saying? Like,
hey, we're talking about it right now, so.
Yeah,
exactly.
And we've been talking about it.
No, like the service is amazing. The company's great. I love what they're doing.
I think the name is fine.
Do you?
Pretty soon you'll come around.
You got the palate of a
He's a millennial now. He doesn't know.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know anything. All right,
He's
next.
in the zone. Sure.
Yeah, you're in the zone. All right, this one's addressed to me. I'll do it. Luke, do you find Bellator's continued business in Israel, and I'll get this in a second, and they're having fighters meet Israeli leadership problematic given Israel's apartheid policies in the West Bank and Gaza? I tweeted about this. Bellator didn't like it too much, which is fine. They don't have to. I'm not here to have a debate about Israel. That's not why I included this, because I'm not really equipped to have one, nor do I think it's really going to be a fun use of our time. But it does raise an interesting question, namely, you had WWE go to Saudi Arabia, and this was, to me, a morally grotesque event of the highest order, right? And people are like, well, every country has blood on their hands, right? But the U.S. government doesn't pay UFC to put on shows. This was straight from the top to get WWE over there. Now, whether it's about Israel, and there's a debate to be had about it, or any other country, consider China and its communist policies and their oppression of the Uyghur people. Consider what Saudi Arabia did. Consider this. In the age of streaming and the age of having a mobile globalized product, you're going to be going to some territories that are either, whether name the country, it's going to rub some people the wrong way. So here's a question for the panel. When should a promotion go into a country or not go into a country? What is the rule there? I'm not talking about security or safety. I'm talking about their human rights record. It's a tough one, right?
Tough, yeah.
That's why I don't get paid that kind of money,
What do you think?
My answer is this.
You thought this was all Brock Lesnar tattoo questions. It is not.
Is this a backhanded thing toward Canada again? No, I'm sorry.
No. Canada's great.
No. I don't know,
What do you
man.
think?
I mean, I truly don't know.
Listen, I got
watching-
sports to ignore shit like this.
But you can't.
I know.
But you can't.
Obviously not. I don't think there's one easy answer. It's not like a one size fits all. I think you have to look at every situation. Who are a lot of times when they go into these markets, they have to deal with certain promoters. They have to deal with the people within the government. Who are you supporting here? Like, is there some element of where you're working with the government where it becomes, like you said, like morally grotesque? Because obviously they're perpetrating these abuses on their own people in some cases. I think that's it's the same thing we see. The Olympics. I mean, this happens almost every year. I think the next one is it Qatar. The next
that's the World Cup.
World Cup.
And that's when slave labor has built those
that
stadiums.
Is just horrible to see and read about. And we're all going. Like all the countries are going. No one is moving on and saying, we refuse to go as some sort of show of morality. And so I think, it's just an example, like, at the end of the day, like, business makes the decision ultimately. Yeah. I would like to see cases where people take some sort of moral stance on stuff like this, but, as we see with the government in this day and age, that's sort of too much to ask for.
Well, I know from the WWE standpoint that there were people behind the scenes who were wanting to do just that. They wanted to take a stand.
And there were a few, like I think John Cena.
Yeah, there were some who didn't.
The ones who had the leverage to do it.
And it's kind of funny though how it does play in. It really does affect things because that money that they got over there, and I don't know what the exact number is, but the number that they picked up by doing that show affects Brock Lesnar, who was filling in for the Roman Reigns thing. Like, I know that this is in that realm, but the Brock Lesnar thing, him coming back to the UFC, could be affected literally because of that one show, which is a weird connection to that whole thing.
My rule on this one is I've been trying to think about, like, what's the answer here? Because even if you think, China is a communist country, do we care? Like, should we not do business there? Like, I don't know what the right answer is, except on this one accord, which is, I think generally I don't have a problem with any promotion going anywhere so long as if there are questions about the government, you're not working in concert with them. In other words, imagine somehow the UFC was able to do a show in North Korea or something, but it wasn't, yes, the government would have to allow it, but they weren't doing it to whitewash the government's horrible human rights abuses. Would that be okay? Yes, it would. I would be very much, because in part of it, you do want to share your product and your vision and your entertainment with the world. But when they begin to align with the powers, that's when I began to get a little red flaggish, personally.
That's what makes the whole Verdum and all the guys, the
Kadyrov stuff.
Yes, 100%. That's what makes that feel so like,
Yeah. Like, would you go to Chechnya? It's like, I mean, they went to Russia, but okay, I don't have any problem with that. But then the question of, like, why was Kadyrov there? Did he just pay for his way? And I mean, is there any way to stop him? Maybe there's not. I don't know what the answer is. Like, we always want to avoid these questions, but it's like, dude, when I got into MMA, if you ever would have asked me, are fighters going to be hanging out with thug dictators? I'd been like, no. And yes, they are. What are you going to do?
I actually had the prop bet that they would, so
did you?
Nailed that one.
Yeah. Is this your 2-week notice right here? All right, next. What would everyone's rapper name be? This one's for you, Chuck. This one I saw, I was like, wow, this is a terrible question. Chuck's going to love it.
When you say rap, no, I'm just kidding.
What kind of rap?
The Myth. Come on.
The Myth, the Man in the Hat.
Yeah, Myth, that's easy.
Why don't you like my designation for you, which is Iceman?
Iceman? I don't know. Somebody already has that, don't they?
Myth is good.
Iceman would be cool.
Myth, yeah.
Myth's a good rap name.
Myth, yeah.
Something, I don't know, maybe something like that.
Rappers always have really stupid acronyms.
Yeah.
Like Scum
We'll
Gang.
see. I fit right in then.
Yeah, exactly. What, do you got a rapper name for us?
Well, if he's going to be the myth, I'm going to be the legend. Man, myth, legend. I don't know. Like, my initials are MC, so I'm kind of halfway there.
Ooh.
But I don't know what the last part would be.
MC, you can just hold it there. DMC.
I would probably crowdsource it,
How about old MC? Instead of MC, you're like...
I'm glad everyone on this panel is a nerd. It makes this conversation especially horrible.
So, the rapper name would be tough. I'm guessing it would have something with Lil in it. But in high school, I used to play a lot of, like, music at parties and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. You played music?
Yeah, I played music.
Like instruments?
Well, no, not like that. Just
like
out of my
CDs.
phone and stuff. Like, nothing too fancy. My friends kidding around.
You didn't play music. You played.
No, I literally
hit the play
played
button.
Exactly. That's called playing music.
Playing music.
He's
playing
MCI.
music.
I'm not playing an
MCI
instrument.
phone over
But
here.
like, I would,
You always want to give him so much credit.
So what would you call it? I'm literally playing music.
You DJ.
Playing. Yo, can you play music?
No, you were using an app.
Exactly. Yo, where's the aux? That's,
You had the best playlist.
That's the question. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
right.
Best mix. So they were kidding around, just call me DJ D-Seg.
D-Seg.
Danny Segura. So maybe I'd just be D-Seg. I
like it.
D-Seg.
I will never call you D-Seg ever. Just so you know.
As they say, The Zone with DJ D-Seg.
DJ
Oh, man, that sounds something.
You could do that.
DJ Cheeky Tico.
There's money in that.
How about that one? What would I do? Well, I would have gone with Big L. You know what? I can go with Big L now that he's dead. I can just be the new Big
Yeah, you could do that.
the new Big L. I did like Big L. I have artwork of Big L at my house.
I don't even know who that is.
You don't?
That's old.
Big L.
Really? No, Big L is old like us.
Old school.
You don't. He's a New York rapper too. You don't know who Big L is?
Nope.
Wow. Wow.
What does he sing?
What does he sing?
What's his biggest?
I don't know, Dad. What does he sing?
What's his biggest record that I don't know?
Oof. He's got. You know what? He has a really famous freestyle that he did. That is that always makes the rounds. Just Google Big L freestyle. But he's got a bunch of ones. God, I'm drawing a blank. Put me on the spot.
Big L fan over here.
No, I know. I'm drawing a blank. All right, let's go to the next one. It's crazy. With the financial stability of the ESPN deal and larger pay-per-view cut coming in 2019, will we finally see some long-term decision-making by the UFC, or should we expect more of the short-term, one card at a time, step over $1 to grab a quarter crap? Now, this is a bit of a, really negative question. I'll say this. I don't know if you guys saw, this could have been under the radar, but I saved it for this one. The UFC apparently has renegotiated with their pay-per-view distributors to get a bigger cut of each buy. They were getting 50-50. I think now they're getting something like, I think they added
70-30.
So yeah, something along those lines.
That's pretty significant.
It's a pretty big jump.
I think they were. I don't think it was quite 50-50. I think they were closer to 60-40, even.
Okay, so let's say 55-45,
They
whatever it
still
was.
made it, yeah.
It's now a jump, so they're not going to have to sell as many to make what they were making before, potentially even more. But who at the table wants to take that one? Do you think that the?
I would not expect any changes. I think UFC generally does. When they try to plan out their schedule, I do think that they try to make a concerted effort to put good quality cards forward in any instance they can. I don't think they have bad faith in doing that. But I think what happens is life happens. Guys get hurt. Guys, can't make dates for whatever reasons. You have people trying to negotiate new contracts, saying no to fights for whatever reasons. And so a lot of times you come to a point where you have to make changes in. But the main thing is pay-per-view is always going to come first. It's always going to come first until we move away from this outdated concept of pay-per-view. The pay-per-view master has to be served. So you're always going to start with those, and then obviously during the course of the year, there's certain pay-per-views that they look at as the biggest ones. The 4th of July one, a lot of times the end of the year one, and so on, Memorial Day. So those are sort of like the tentpole events, to use Bellator nomenclature, and. So you're always going to build around those. So I think they like the idea of having these huge major events because those are the ones that they're going to generate their biggest dollars. It makes sense business-wise to do that, but it is sort of robbing.
It's funny that we don't talk about pay-per-views with the kind of reluctance. You know what I mean? Because a pay-per-view, why would anybody want there to be a pay-per-view? You'd rather it just be on ESPN or be somewhere free, right? You don't want it to be a pay-per-view, but they have, because they started off as a pay-per-view company, we just expect big events. Pay-per-view. It's still to this day. It's just we're just used to paying for the bigger product. But I think that day, we've talked about this before. You wonder how long that can continue. I really do wonder. I mean, the numbers have been going down considerably over time. The big pay-per-views are still big. I think they could still do something with the pay-per-view for years, but I think it's going to be narrowed down at some point to a quarterly event or something like that, where there's one big pay-per-view per quarter. That's the way I mean, because I don't see how you can do. They usually do 13, 12 to 13, and I don't see how that's sustainable over the long haul.
I think with all this era of the money fights and champs and all this, I think that's going to continue. It's not going to slow down. I would say though, for at least the very beginning portion of the ESPN deal, the UFC always likes to start off these new deals with a pop. So I do think we're going to get some pretty full cards.
Hope so.
Especially the very beginning ones. And I hope that money that they're making more, trickles down and we get some some quality cards in.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with the premise of the question. I think it's an important one to ask so that we can make sense of what they're trying to get at. I generally find that the UFC does have long-term thinking. The question is, are they making the right long-term calls? Not are they even thinking about it. Of course they're thinking about it. To me, it looks like they're going to drive pay-per-view into the ground. That's the whole. They're basically saying to themselves, "We are going to ride into this vehicle till the wheels fall off, and then ride it a little further, and then by that point transition over." They've got a lot of guaranteed income now with all of their television deals globally, with this ESPN deal, and now they're going to get a bigger share of pay-per-view. But I just don't see in a world where DAZN's whole pitch, and not just them, many others, is we're trying to get rid of pay-per-view. We want it done with. I don't know how you survive that 3-4 years down the line. TV.
No, it's already generationally switching.
TV is changing so fast. So we'll have to see. All right, next. Let's see. Last time Cerrone fought at lightweight was in 2015. Will he be able to handle it safely now? And is there a decent chance that his performance will diminish from what we've seen at welterweight? Despite his wins at lightweight, he was twice to face Khabib, and his win over Benson was questionable. What do you guys think?
He was twice to face Khabib.
I'm not sure what that part is about. But, I mean, he's handled his weight cuts pretty well, even in weird situations. He seems like he's pretty diligent when it comes to that. I don't think he ballooned up that big, did he? I mean, it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like he added big muscle mass, and stuff like that to become a welterweight. So I think he's still hovering. I really don't think it'd be that a problem for him.
Also, Donald Cerrone is nearing 40, right? How old is he? 38?
I'm not sure.
He's 37.
37.
Or 30,
So
36. 36.
36. So it's not like the transition came when he was like 24, 25, and then all of a sudden he's a much older man and grew into his body. He already made the transition to welterweight when he was a full-grown adult. So I don't expect him. I think maybe there will be some. I don't think it'll be anything noticeable, the cut, and I don't think he doesn't have a history of missing weight. No. I think maybe the cut will affect him on how he feels personally, but as far as his performance, I expect it to be the same vintage Cowboy.
One thing we know about Cowboy, when he says he's going to fight, he shows up.
He shows up.
He shows up on weight. He's professional when it comes to that. I really don't have.
He just switches his Budweiser to Bud Light for a while, and he's okay.
You're good.
I don't know how he drinks that stuff. All right, next.
They pay him.
With all of this gas station hot dog talk, what is your shouts to Brian Campbell?
Yeah, I was going to say.
What is your top fast food weakness?
Oh, man.
Chuck, you go first.
Fast food?
I don't ever, the older I get, the less, I don't crave fast food.
Not really.
But there's one exception I have. With one.
I like Mexican food, so it'd be like Del Taco or Taco Bell or something like that.
What's better, Del Taco or Taco Bell?
I mean, Taco Bell goes back further. Like, Del Taco's more of the West Coast for me when I was out there, so I guess Taco Bell would be the one.
That's a hard one. I mean, there's a place in my town called Super Duper Weenie hot dog place. Unbelievable. They're like gourmet style. I mean, it is a fast food place, but it's like gourmet style hot dogs. And their fries also are.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's the one you crave?
I mean, I don't have it that often, but.
See, I thought we were talking about chains. Because I know a place that can get fast food.
Give me a chain.
Yeah, chain.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a fast food chain called Duchess.
Oh, yeah.
Duchess has
what is Duchess?
It's a fast food place. It's the hamburgers.
It's like
thank you for that tautology. What do they serve?
Mostly burgers and fries.
Yeah, it's like a Hardee's. They have variations, though. You can get
but it's made they don't freeze anything. Everything's fresh. So,
fresh.
I mean, for fast food.
Yeah.
Fast food fresh.
You're eating 3 different cows all grounded into one.
We're talking about fast food, Luke.
Yeah.
We're talking about fast food.
I'm just saying. You got a fast food craving?
I have no shame, so I'll just say
Go ahead and say it.
Once in a while, I crave McDonald's.
I've never craved McDonald's. What is it about McDonald's you crave?
Once in a while.
What do you get when you order?
He wants a Happy Meal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, to be honest, I just want the toy. So
Hi, my name's Danny. They call me D-Seg. I play music. Can I have a Happy Meal?
That's exactly what happens.
What do you order?
You know
what do you order?
I switch it up. They've come out with new things, so I'm also down to try some new things. But it's usually kind of basic. Like I'll go like a double cheeseburger with bacon and maybe some fries, a Coke. McFlurry's always bomb.
I've never had a McFlurry.
What?
Never.
Get out.
I've had a Dairy Queen Blizzard. They're the same, right?
McFlurry's the shit. It's really good.
It's not better than a Get out of here.
I've been to Dairy Queen, I think, like twice in my life, maybe.
It's an American. It's super, super duper Southern American. Yeah.
But McDonald's hits the spot every now and then.
All right. My weakness is, I don't even hide from this. I don't crave Wendy's. I don't crave Burger King. I never crave McDonald's. What would you call Five Guys? Is Five Guys fast food?
Yeah.
You have to sit down and wait a little bit for it, but it's amazing, and if I'll eat it, but it's not like I don't seek it out. I don't really seek out anything, especially I don't seek out Hardee's is where dreams go to just get farted out of a trucker. I mean, it's just the worst place on earth. Do you guys? I don't crave to see it, but do you guys have Roy Rogers up here?
Yeah.
Their bit used to be buy burgers, and they would have a Fixins bar. And I don't crave that. I don't crave any of those things.
How many things you don't want? Tell us what you do.
I don't crave Crystal or White Castle either.
What?
No.
I don't like White Castle.
Yeah, it's always
Chick-fil-A?
Chick-fil-A's fine, but no.
Chipotle because you like to gamble with E. coli?
No, I do like to gamble with E. coli at Taco Bell. Taco Bell is just my undying weakness.
Especially after like 15 beers.
After 15 beers, and then
6
Taco
shots
Bell,
of
and then another 15 beers.
That's usually about when
I just find, I mean, that's my go-to. My order, I don't know if I have a regular order, but my favorite item on the menu is the double-decker taco.
Yeah.
You guys ever get that?
Yeah.
That's a soft taco, and then it's a hard taco. Then they take a soft taco shell and they put beans in it. And then they collapse the soft shell on top of the hard. It's all these like turducken fast food
They have a lot of
Frankenstein
variations
monsters.
like that nowadays.
Do they still have the chalupa? Does that still exist?
I've never had that. I stick to just what I like. I don't ever order around. The volcano taco was nice for a time.
Was that the Doritos one?
Yeah, well, it was hot too. It was like a big giant Dorito you were eating.
Yeah.
That's the only. I know. After this whole conversation, that's the only weakness I have for fast food.
Yeah.
That's it. What is your order? Your number one order?
I do like the double-decker tacos, man.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I like just the regular crunchy tacos, and I get really basic stuff, honestly.
Yeah, I
don't
can
really
tell,
try,
Mr. Vanilla.
Yeah, I don't really try, like, they always have, like, those, like you're saying, the variations of, where they've got, like, meat as the tortilla, things like that. I don't try any of that stuff. So usually just tacos, I'll get, like, the double-decker taco and usually some kind of, like, combo burrito or something like that.
Let me end the show here, if I can, real quickly, putting Jared Cannonier. Who brought him up? Was it you? Let me put Jared Cannonier on blast. So I had, in a nice way, I had Jared on my radio show, and he was like, man, I got one goal in New York, well, one goal after winning. He goes, I want some real New York authentic pizza. How can I get some? And I said, stay on the line. So I got his number, and then after the weigh-ins, I texted him, and I was like, yo, here are all of the good pizza joints. And I listed them. I went, like, my buddy's been living in New York for 30 years.
Don't tell me he went to Sbarro.
Worse.
Oh, man, what?
So after he wins, I get him back on the thing, and I go, hey, how was your New York pizza experience? He's like, man, it wasn't that good. And I go, wait, how could it, what? Like, what do you mean was it good? I was like, where did you go? He went to Ray's. Do you guys know Ray's?
Yes.
It's the cheapest, shittiest pizza joint in New York. It is in Times Square.
That's our sponsorship.
I know.
In Times Square, Jared Cannonier went for a New York City experience. You might as well, I mean, what is the equivalent of this? I can't even imagine. It's like, I don't know, you wanted an authentic Mexican experience and you got a chalupa and you're like, wow, Mexican food's not that good. Yeah, no kidding. You didn't eat it. So, Jared, thanks a lot.
He blew that one.
Huh?
He blew that one.
Yeah, what a ridiculous man he is. Anyway, all right. That's enough for us. We appreciate you guys watching. It was good to have you back, Mike. You didn't miss a beat.
See you into it, 2021.
Actually, you missed a bunch of beats, but metaphorically, you didn't miss a beat. We really appreciate you guys watching. Keep sending those questions and comments using the hashtag #TheMMAHour. That's it for us today. For Chuck, for Mike, for Danny, I'm Luke. Hands up, chin down, let them fly. This is the MMA Beat.